Abyss, check. Sharp tonal contrast, check. Similar to Dark Souls, check. Whimsical animation undercut by heavy themes, check.
Sounds like a No Clip podcast game.
Yeah.
Welcome to No Clip. I'm Chad Runnerman.
I'm JJ Artemis.
And I'm Andy Kennett.
And today, we're going to be talking about Hollow Knight, which was a game that was released in 2017 and developed by Team Cherry. Hollow Knight is, for all intents and purposes, and by intents and purposes I mean this line where we talk about what genre it is, a Metroidvania game. But I also feel like Hollow Knight sort of draws from, like, a million different things.
Yes.
Like, I find it... I feel like there's a point where you can draw inspiration from stuff so much that the fact that I'm saying that it drew inspiration might just be me cheating a game out of saying it's actually an original concept. Because Hollow Knight really is. A lot of the things that it puts together are not things that you would expect to see in this genre, and because of that, like, it feels really fresh as compared to other Metroidvanias, which are largely very spiritually connected to Metroid, like, in a way that is, like, just incontrovertible.
Yeah, it's a way more action-heavy, which until I played this game, didn't really realize was a thing that isn't true of most Metroidvanias. They're more about, like, exploration or, like, platforming, and,
Yeah, like Metroidvania is generally a description of the progression method of your game. It talks about the ways in which you acquire new abilities, right, which can broadly be almost anything in a Metroidvania genre, but mostly movement, that allow you to just go to different areas and access more of them. But that description kind of doesn't explain what you do in the game, which is why you get a lot of Metroidvania structures and a lot of other genres and stuff.
Right, which is why I'm so shocked, like, because Hollow Knight is the game that made me think about it, despite the fact that we've talked about multiple Metroid games, plus Ori, and, you know, I've played several other Metroidvania games, and it's, like, actually really shocking how close to Metroid a lot of them stay.
Yeah.
Like, they don't like to venture too far off the beaten path.
yeah, I think, and this was my own kind of interpretation, was Team Cherry, I think, was like 3 guys.
Something like that.
Like, you know, who did most of the game. They seemed like they were, like, really ambitious and, like, the kind of people who have, like, always wanted to make a game. And I think if they had, like, lots of endless resources and money, they would have wanted to make, like, a 3D adventure game.
Right.
But because they were limited and had to do something 2D, they just kind of picked this style and made it work for what they wanted to accomplish. If that makes sense.
It does. And they tried pretty hard to make the constraints of, like, a 2D pixel art game still affect the kind of gravity that you'd expect from, like, a dramatic Metroidvania. What I'm trying to refer to with that is, like, the moments in Metroidvania games where you'll break into a new environment and, like, kind of take in the gravity of the whole new place that you've found. The one that always sticks out for me is, like, Fandara Drifts in Metroid Prime, the way you, like, break through a door and you just have this whole big expanse that's completely different than anything else you've seen.
Right.
In Hollow Knight, it seemed like they were trying to go for similar senses of scale because you're going through this, like, dead civilization. Like, when you first break out of City of Tears, and there's even a couple of times where you get to look at City of Tears from different angles,
right,
which is really rare in a 2D game. Like, you actually get to see City of Tears from, like, the perpendicular plane or whatever because of that little lighthouse thing.
Yeah.
But it kind of made me jump a little bit. Because you're seeing that they're like, oh, they're actually trying to represent this place as a 3D space in my mind, even though I don't explore all of the different dimensions of the space.
Which is actually, it's a really rare thing to see in a 2D game, but ironically, it is sort of easier to do, because you don't actually have to build the locations wrapping around on each other. You can just sort of hand-wave it away with the hand-drawn map that exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to get this out of the way real quick because I know it's going to come up. It just is going to come up. Mm-hmm. The reason that I know about this game, and I'm not going to swear that this is true from either of you, and it ties into sort of our discussions about inspiration, is that this is one of the games that came out where everyone referred to it as like a Souls-like, a game that is like Dark Souls. And the reason I want to bring it up is because I feel like the things that it draws from Dark Souls are the things that make this game feel so unique, even within the larger collection of games that are referred to as Souls-likes. Because the things that it draws from Dark Souls are not like an Estus system or like the slow-paced combat. It pulls like exploration that actually like feels like you're learning stuff.
Yeah.
And also it's like subdued, subtle way of telling a story largely through other people or other bugs.
It's really tonally similar.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise, I actually generally like the narrative of this game and the tone that it goes for with that narrative more than something like Dark Souls because of the levity that the art style adds on moments when you aren't contemplating the like extinction of this race.
Right,
yeah.
Yeah, and the story even is just exactly the story of Dark Souls.
I thought it was that. It's very close.
Yeah, it's almost exactly the same.
I did not see the credits of this game. Just being up front.
Basically, it's like an ancient kingdom that's fallen, where like everyone who used to live in it's basically gone hollow.
Mm-hmm.
And
Night.
yeah, and the Hollow Knight sealed himself away to like get rid of like some kind of corrupting curse, and then you are like a pawn that kind of goes through and gains power and kills him and takes his place.
Right.
Wait. What? You saw the credits, right, Andy?
Yeah, I got 2 of the endings, and I got to like the boss of the 3rd ending, and it was real hard, and I didn't take the time to beat it.
Oh, damn it. Okay, at least you know about the 3rd ending boss. Because
I have watched all of these, so
of course,
I'm aware.
If you weren't, you would be incompetent and unworthy of the podcast. But when you step back, and it's like the lore of this game is not Dark Souls, but
no, the lore is more unique, but like the main story is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, especially if you go mainline progression and don't look for a lot of the weird secret stuff that they hide away all over the place. But I mean, you are still essentially, if you just go sort of like crit path all through the end, you're playing a vague fallen kingdom which you perpetuate ignorantly.
Right.
Yeah. Through some kind of sealing mechanism. So it's still the same in that sense, but it really did affect me a lot more comparatively, especially the actual final boss of the game. Once that final piece sort of came into play, you never really get all the answers to everything, which we might still get later because they're still making DLC for this game.
It's only been a year since the game came out. It's not that unusual. The unusual thing is because it's such a small team.
Yeah, that's what is significant about it.
Yeah.
Is it supposed to get like an additional DLC pack and then also one where you get to play as Hornet?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. What keeps shocking me about this, which is kind of strange because in a lot of the ways that we approach discussions about games, this kind of isn't even something that we want to think about. Mm-hmm. But really, something that I feel like is notable enough in Hollow Knight's case is that it deserves some kind of mention on the podcast is like the monetary situation of this game. Like, how did 3 people make this game, like, from, like, 2,000 Kickstarter backers, and then charge $15 for it, and then release, like, free DLC into, like, the indefinite future? Like, how is that even a financial thing they can do?
It's probably possible, although very difficult and time-consuming to produce something like this without spending that much money. And they might have just gone that route.
Yeah, it depends on how long the game was in production, which you would think the longer the game is in production, the more money it would actually require. But depending on how they went about developing it, this was sort of their, we'll call it a freshman effort, even though it's probably not entirely true.
I know that this game is kind of the spiritual successor, not mechanically, but in a lot of tonal senses, to a game jam game that they tried to make. It was like Hungry Night or something, I think is the name of it.
That sounds correct, though I'm not 100%.
Yeah.
But I did read up on this as well.
Right.
But if it's something that they had been working on over like a long period of time, while maintaining day jobs.
Yeah, I was gonna say they probably would have needed to use the money to I think they hired somebody to do the music or something. They hired a couple people to do a couple things.
They hired somebody to do a good job on the music.
Yeah. The composer is one of the 3 guys.
Oh, it is. So never mind then. But I know they did hire some other people to do some stuff.
Yeah.
And then they probably paid to license an engine, and that's probably they might have just not paid anybody else anything.
It's just shocking to think that something like this is even possible, and you hear so much about the incredible burdens of modern game development, financially speaking, and how much the financial incentives of modern development have pushed out middlemen. But this is not a game I would describe as corner cutting in any way. This game repeatedly shocked me at how much was still left there for me to find, of which I just want an explanation. This just seems like one little counter argument to this same narrative that I've heard about the oppressive games industry, the oppressive game development scape for so long. I've heard nothing but about how hard and expensive it is to make actual meaningful products, but you've got this thing popping up in 2017. That seems like a mostly freshman effort. It's from inexperienced people on a small team, and they just did it somehow.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's a passion project, and it's probably true that they all worked on it without being paid, and that's the big money sink, is that you have to hire hundreds of employees to make a AAA game, and you have to pay them I think they get paid pretty well. You have to pay them a lot of money.
Yeah, you have to pay personnel in order to develop a game, and if you're making it with your friends, you don't really have to. And that's also the benefit of it, because the flip side of that, while games generally are getting more expensive to make, indie games are becoming easier and cheaper to get into development on, because a number of development kits and your engines and things are released for free. You have access to it from the beginning, and then basically where all the money comes in is when you're going to publish it.
Yeah, you're going to advertise it.
Yeah, so you have to advertise it. Do I need to pay a release fee for this to the engine? Because I know that some engines do, especially depending on platform. Steam is actually pretty generous about that kind of a thing, so you mostly, when you release on Steam, don't need to. Coincidentally, that is where this game is being sold. There's a Switch port that's coming out, but it's not.
Yeah, I was actually really sad that we were doing this, so I didn't get to play it on the Switch. That's what I was waiting for.
Would have been perfect for the Switch.
It would.
Yeah.
It would be perfect.
We really got to work on that so that we can speak it as if it's a hive mind talking.
Yeah.
That's what I want to. That's where I want to get to with Perfect for the Switch. But they can release it for the Switch now because the game is already successful.
Right.
It's been a part of the general game space conversation for a while now, and kind of got buoyed up by in the way that lots of games that are like Dark Souls got buoyed.
Right.
While that sort of social space hit its peak a year or two ago.
And I mean, that's how it got as successful as it was on Kickstarter as well. It was basically marketing itself as a Dark Souls game.
Yeah.
Though I feel like it strays pretty far from that.
Very far.
Yeah, I mean, if you boiled it down and kind of looked at it really generally, it's got, a bonfire system and, an iteration on an Estus system, kind of.
Right.
And, action combat in an oppressive dark fantasy world. So, I think it's fair that they can get away with calling it that.
I just feel like we're starting to reach the... I mean, people joke about this.
I agree that it's very different.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying. I understand where it comes from.
In particular, since this is... I like the healing system in this game a great deal, and it's not ripped from anything else that I am aware of. It is not ripped from Dark Souls. It is certainly not ripped from any Metroidvania game that I know of.
Right.
Has anyone... The whole incentive that where you have to switch... Cause there are plenty of games I've played before that has a system in which you recover your magic ability by dealing like melee damage and switching back and forth like
Right.
that, which creates more dynamic combat situations, which I always find fun. But I never played a game that also used with that system used your magic as an HP resource at the same time.
Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts has...
Like the
Hitting
heal
things.
spell.
Oh, the original Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, hitting
Okay.
things refills your magic, and you use your magic to heal.
Yeah. And my original comparison, which obviously proved to not be true, but the healing by itself, Horizon Zero Dawn has that similar, like, you can heal based on how much of this depletable resource you have in, like, a little side pouch, which was my initial touchstone for it. But, yeah,
but it's like a resource you have to gather outside of battle.
Right.
Yeah. But I really liked the effect that specific system had on overworld traversal. It made... I liked that they were able to link... Because in a vague sense, systems like this where combat is linked to your HP recovery is true of every game. You know, you kill an enemy, they drop little orbs that recover your health.
Yeah.
That's true of so many 2D things. But I liked that they connected it further by giving you the granularity of just hitting a thing at all instead of actually completing the challenge. Instead of making health a reward for overcoming a challenge, you can instead link health to overcoming or completing one specific piece of a challenge, and it allowed the actual fights with the enemies and especially the bosses to be way more dynamic because of that.
The bosses were really kind of the thing that I felt like this had the most effect on, because in overworld traversal, with the exception of the times when abilities were necessary to actually progress, like smashing through like the glass floors and stuff, I found myself just being like, I won't ever use spells at all, because pretty much everything can be defeated with just the sword, and doing that both preserves your HP and your mana, which becomes then too good to use scenario. Which is bad for me, but the bosses are where it becomes interesting, because you want to heal, but healing takes a long time, but you regain your healing ability very quickly. So you have this, like, dynamic of, like, okay, I have an opening, do I hit them? Do I run the fuck away and heal? Do I, you have all of these options.
Yeah. And because healing without any charms related is so difficult initially, healing is itself also like an extremely... It's almost learning when to heal and how to heal correctly is about as difficult as learning how to attack or hit things correctly.
It's like the first part of a boss fight that like I try to figure out, or like when are the healing opportunities.
Yeah. And that makes healing engaging in a way that it often isn't. Because in so many other games, the healing systems are structured in games that use healing as a resource that you deplete, in which it's getting disengaging from an enemy is comparatively easy, and then you just heal. Like, healing is just a thing you do after you run away in a lot of games.
Yeah.
And this game because everything's limited to one screen in the 2D combat system, it made healing like a really tactical decision and like really cognitive, and I liked it a great deal.
It added a lot to the fact that most of the boss arenas were just Mega Man boss arenas.
Yeah.
Like, it's a square, occasionally there's a hazard of some kind in it, but mostly just squares.
Mostly just squares. That's kind of true in general, which I assumed was part of a development constraint, but they were able to do so many things to make up for the fact that everything was just squares that I don't care literally at all.
Right.
I think it was a good decision for them to simplify a lot of the level design down to that, so they could work on making things as aesthetically beautiful and as all the enemies as mechanically interesting as they are. But before we get off of this,
Right.
I want to focus my favorite thing the healing system does into boss combat, which is, as I mentioned before, in conventional boss combat, in which healing is tied to a resource, like you have X number of potions, you can cast a spell X time before you run out of this resource, it's always sort of like a resource comparison game or some kind of battle of attrition where you're fighting against a thing and you have an amount of like allotted... In some games, it's just like allotted errors with your HP, but in other games, it's like, you have a bunch of other HP and you're going to have the extra time to use it if you want to.
Right. Compare Trauma Center, which had basically a set amount of time that you could fuck around healing, versus Skyrim, where you can carry in a functionally limitless version of amount of potatoes to just eat at will.
Right, but the point is that in those kind of conventional resource depletion systems, in the games that even manage to make those resources limited, which is surprisingly not many, like like once you get later and later in like the Final Fantasy copycat history, it becomes very clear that like it's not actually something you're supposed to manage as a resource. It's supposed to be a time thing. But whatever. My point is that you're, even if it is limited, you're like have to imagine this comparison between meters, and you're kind of having to like do these estimations between like whether or not you have enough health to be able to finish things. It's always attrition wars, and a lot of conventional bosses, whether they be RPG bosses or even action RPG bosses. But in this game, what the healing system allows is it ties your ability to heal by how well you're doing in the fight at any particular time, and it doesn't really care about how much you've messed up before that. You can, if you're good enough at Hollow Knight, you can always recover no matter what state you're in. Like, none of your actual errors are permanent in the way that, like, for example, in Dark Souls, if you fuck up and take a hit, and you're just like, oh, no, that's just one Estus gone, and there's nothing I can do to get that back. But in this game, if you can go from, if you're good enough, it probably won't happen because you're not good enough. No one is. But, like, hypothetically, you can have a comeback. You can, like, actually get from a situation in which you're fucking up repeatedly and don't have a whole lot of healing resources left, and you're like, just have a couple of masks, and you can build yourself back up to a state, and that makes the fights way more dramatic and fun to me. And I really love how that healing system interacts with the boss design. It's maybe my favorite mechanical feature of the game. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that is all, because we're talking about, like, boss mechanics in the healing system, which are largely, like, some of the most unique parts of this game and why it functions the way that it does.
And it's like where the difficulty comes in like the later game bosses. Like the dream bosses, like the hidden ones that you find are really difficult because it's so hard to find the time to heal.
Because they're just very aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a... See, I come off a little less positively on it, I think, than you do, but still pretty positively. I like this system. I like any system that, like, makes you have to think about your timing on healing, just because, like, that is something that should take time and, like, some cognitive effort at all. I feel like the issue is the difference between overworld traversal and boss fights, where I think that it works super, super well in the boss fight scenario, where you are actively engaged with an enemy over a long period of time, and the bosses in this game do tend to take a long time because they want to emphasize this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have an issue with that, shockingly. But in overworld traversal, I feel like the healing system is sort of like, I mean, maybe they just didn't want you to die very often, but I felt like a lot of the time it was just sort of like, okay, like I'll just find some guy crawling on a thing and attack it. And that lends itself to what I think is one of, I guess one of my favorite parts about the design of this game, is that I felt like, as compared to most Metroidvanias, and I think it's in order to get around the limitation that the healing system implements, or imposes rather, on like overworld combat, a lot of areas aren't designed like traditional Metroidvania areas where it's mostly about traversal and like getting through obstacles. A lot of them are designed as like screens in a platformer where there's like a really specific challenge that you have to get through to get from one point to another in blocks that go along the grid of the map.
This game rarely pushes super hard on the like conventional platformer engagement, like where you're, like Queen's Gardens is the thing that comes to mind for me the strongest, other than of course the fucking White Palace, which we will get to. God damn it! But it actual just damage zone platformer challenges work well here because it's one of the few circumstances where you don't have
Damage zone?
that's what people call like the generic form of like a spike pit. Right?
Oh, I've never heard that before.
Whatever you color it, whatever you paint over it, it's the box that hurts you.
Right.
But
I'd like to give this game like a massive shout out, by the way, for not pulling an Ori and just having things that are nearly invisible that kill you instantaneously.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
When we talked about the art, inevitably.
yeah, but you can't recover any soul from platforming challenges, which actually makes them discrete challenges again with a set number of errors on your part that you're allowed to have. In enemies, the only time that the game really wants your progress to actually be stopped is through a boss or a mini boss most of the time. Otherwise, it's just making sure you don't mess up too badly. Like you can essentially, if an enemy hits you once and you kill them, normally you come out even in overworld traversal because unless you have like other charms and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I think your issue, Chet, is more of like a balance issue or like a difficulty curve issue. Because I remember early on, the traversing the overworld feeling like fairly oppressing, like in the first couple areas, and like I actually like died and lost all my geo, like trying to get my little ghost back.
Yeah.
But then once I got once I got to the Mantis village and I overcame all that and whatever, like I basically never lost my geo ever again.
Right.
Had a pretty easy time getting around. It's like overworld traversal is like a hurdle that you just jump like a third of the way in and like almost never have to worry about it again.
It's also notable that like so I like started and stopped this game like 3 times over the course of the extended period that we had to play it, and the first time that I stopped playing it was at Hornet. I could not beat that boss. Like it took me, I think it ended up taking me like 15 total tries to beat her.
Oh wow.
This game just was not like the long and short of it. I think this game is objectively good. I think that it is a challenging game, and I think that when you make a challenging game, there has to be an equal amount of desire to the challenge from on the part of the player.
Yeah.
And this game didn't drive that in me at all. So I didn't get good, so to speak.
You didn't get good. Why not?
But the part before Hornet, everything before Hornet sucks real bad and is the worst. And then everything after that becomes fun because you have the dash. And the dash makes this game, like the combat in this game, way better.
Yeah, this was like my big takeaway or like my big point to make with this game is I think this game is genuinely unique in the genre, and it takes too long to get to that point.
Yeah.
Because, like, I had a way less exaggerated version of that experience as well, where I was playing it, and I was, like, not feeling super pulled in. I was, like, loving the way it looked. But other than that, it felt like a super generic Metroidvania. And then, until I got the dash and the wall jump, and then I'm like, oh... Now I'm actually playing the game. It's like what it felt like after I got that. I'm like, oh, I get it now. It's like when everything kind of clicked.
Yeah.
Because
about like what like the identity of the game, and they don't get to it till like a couple hours in.
Right. And you get like, if you've played a Metroidvania before, then you know when you like see stuff that you're like, I'll get an ability to get to that stuff.
Oh yeah, I literally had a notes page on my phone that was like the point on the map where I thought there was a thing I could come back to, and me like theorizing about what hypothetical ability could let me reach there. So it's like I had like 5 things that were like double jump question mark?
And then you realize you don't get double jump until you're like really far into the game.
But like, this has like that kind of super easy to pull off wall jump, so you don't really need the double jump for the most part.
Yeah.
Until like the late game.
Yeah, I also thought double jump for the longest time until I got the wall jump and was like, okay, I guess this works too. And then you go back and start finding other stuff, and you start feeling like you're playing a Metroidvania, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's like, because the game gives you no motivation to it's like, because it is Dark Souls-esque in the way that it tells its story, you don't know what the knight is doing, or why you would want to go into this place. So they send you in not only with no direction, which is something familiar to people who have played games like this before, but also no, like, end goal. Like, you don't know what things are important, you just know that you're walking around in, like, at the beginning, a pretty standard Metroidvania. They're even, like, the first room that you come across is even, like, a room that has 2 floating platforms with an enemy that goes in a full circle around it. And you're like, okay, alright, I know what I can't shoot it, but I can hit it with a sword, otherwise I'm playing Metroid. Like,
Yeah,
I know this.
Yeah, that was another thing that I actually kind of forgot about, is in the beginning, like, maybe I just missed some stuff, but, like, I really felt like I was just aimlessly wandering around, having no idea where to go.
This game really strongly makes what I call the AD&D adventurer assumption, which is a thing which is like a classic D&D design perspective that gets borrowed by a lot of stuff. It became increasingly fashionable over the last 10 years or so as people started to be more like nostalgic about older D&D editions, in like whether that be in tabletop design or video game design or whatever. But the idea is because this game actually talks about it in the opening town when you're going down, like oh, lots of people go down there, few return, but there could be fantastical treasures. Like the assumption of this game is that like you don't need to incentivize the player to explore because that's why they're playing the game, and that's the assumption they come in with.
I still I absolutely hate it when games take that to its extreme and like don't give you like a, hey, you should probably go do this thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you for reference. I'm just describing the approach that I think
I really don't like that. It's really hard to do that right. Like, you need, like, a basic goal.
Like, as you described on, I'm assuming, the Metroid Prime podcast, the inciting planet. Like, you need the place that you go that establishes, like, you as a character before you actually begin in on the game.
Right. I think a little part of what they were hoping for that was assuming people would go right and stumble on the black egg and then just be so captivated by the mystery of the black egg that they would just want to keep playing, but I don't think you quite got there.
You guys know me.
Yes, yeah.
And you know that I walked into the black egg and went like, okay, and then left and then didn't even like register it as important.
Yes.
I was so driven by the like caterpillar, like the worm guys.
The grubs.
Yeah, the grubs. I was like, oh shit, these grubs. And then like I got like the first couple and went back and they started saying, and I was like, oh, I gotta get these grubs, man.
Yeah, I was calling them wormies to myself for like the whole game.
For some reason, that was like a whole big important thing that ends up being like the driving force of your character's progression throughout the game. Unimportant. Worms in eggs, A+. That's what I'm telling.
I mean, they are super cute.
They're adorable, yeah.
Therefore, like, satisfying to collect.
And you always have to like save them from some like wretched situation.
Oh god, I was going to say something. Oh yeah, the black egg totally worked on me though. Like, I kept coming back to that, like being like, "Wow, the fuck do I get in here?" Before I like figured out what you needed to do to open it. Like, that really stuck in my mind the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's what they were trying to bank on. And the game's comparatively pretty linear until the dash. Although I know you can get into some bullshit. At what point did you quit, Chad?
I'd gotten 2 of the Dreamers, I think is what they're called.
Oh, then you were pretty damn far into the game.
Yeah, it took me a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of optional stuff to do, but you were most of the way through, like, the critical path.
Yeah.
Yeah, strict crit path of this game is, like, ridiculously bare bones if you as the player want it to be. But as I said, the game makes the AD&D assumption, and it's like, of course you're not going to just go to
right, you're going to explore. And I explored like a fair amount. There's no way for me to describe the amount of time that I actually spent in this game. Because
I noticed that your Steam said that you played this for 70 hours.
Right. I didn't actually play it for 70. I left it on overnight at one point. So like there's like a 24-hour period in there that's like completely irrelevant and probably more. I probably spent like 15 or so hours. I didn't do a great job of collecting shit and died a lot in the game. But yeah, because I watched like a commentary let's play for the rest of the game, so I knew that I was like pretty close.
Yeah.
I had a similar kind of not problem but like experience, I guess, where I didn't do a lot of like the collecting and finding of extra shit till I'd already beaten all the dreamers.
That's
So,
just
like,
you in a Metroidvania
yeah,
now.
fighting like well, I actually
Fighting the Omega Pirate on
Yeah.
60 health.
This one
20
was-
missiles.
Previously.
Force you to try and beat games with 4 energy tanks,
Well,
25 missiles.
This one wasn't nearly as extreme for me though. Like I actually did find a fair number of things, but like the because of that though, the Watcher Knights ended up being like the hardest fucking boss for me in the whole game.
What are the Watcher Knights?
One of the dreamers is the Watcher. He's in the City of Tears.
Oh, the roly-poly guys.
The
in City
roly-poly
Tears?
knights.
Okay,
Yes. They were
gotcha.
basically the Abyss Watchers. Where they share like the
Yeah, I
the
gotcha.
essence that goes in between them and reanimates their dead bodies and shit.
Basically the Abyss Watchers, but
Yeah.
roly-poly bugs. That's
Yeah.
kind of this game. Yeah. Basically that, but like adorable insects all the time.
I loved, like, as much as I don't love boss fights in games generally. Like, that's just sort of like a thing with me.
Okay.
Not that I dislike them, it's just like they're never the highlight of any game most of the time. We'll talk about Monster Hunter World next time and how it's mostly just boss fights, and I'll try
I
and
actually
explain
kind of
that.
feel the same way. Like a lot of people, I feel like boss fights are like the meat and potatoes of the game for them. Whereas like I enjoy them, but I feel like as like much more of an equal element to everything else.
Right. But I felt like the concepts of the bosses in this game were so good, like, throughout. Like, the majority of the ones that I fought, I felt like set themselves up in a way that made them feel really important to just, like, the game generally.
Dung Defender.
I was literally going to bring up Dung Defender as my first example here, because it is the quintessential, like I described all of the boss arenas as being like Mega Man boss arenas.
Yeah.
Dung Defender is a Mega Man boss in like the most video gamey way possible. He's just all about dodging projectiles and attacking as he moves around in a square. And I loved it. Like, it was cool and fun, but I didn't, like, obviously it's not, like, a huge thing. I can't remember the name of the other boss that I'm thinking of. It's the guy who gives you the drop attack. Like, the down
Soul
B.
Master?
The Soul Master.
Oh, Soul Master is amazing.
He's so good! That's probably my favorite boss that I fought in the game.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good boss.
But
You can get a rematch with him after you get the Soul Needle.
Tyrant.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, you can go back to like a few of the bosses you've already killed with the Soul Needle, and like
Does he make a, like, comparatively hilarious death rattle noise to the Soul Master?
yes, he
Good.
does. Yeah.
That was when that happened. It was just so unexpected that I like bust up laughing. It was good.
There after the Dung Defender, there was like some kind of a lever that you hit that made like some like I think green liquid.
Yes.
Like, what does that do?
That drains the swamp underneath. He was defending Isma's garden.
Oh, it drains that.
It drains that so you can access it and get Isma's
Okay.
tier and then go.
Yeah,
And then
I
go
was
through
actually
the,
like,
the Valley of Drakes.
yeah,
And then
circle around back to Fire.
Yeah.
But now that explains
fight the
a
four,
lot
yeah.
because I was walled pretty hard trying to get into the Queen's Gardens because I had missed Yzma's tier,
Ah.
so I had to like look up what the fuck I was supposed to do, and I was
What-
like, oh, there's like an area down here that I totally missed. How did that happen? And that
Welcome
explains
to
why.
what I imagine is a lot of people's problem who bounced off this game is just being like, where the fuck do I go at all? I feel like there's a lot of times when you're just sort of like I was driven mostly by just an intense desire to fill in the map.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, yeah, I that ended up being my experience, but like not till after I'd gotten like a third of the way in. Yeah, like I feel like it didn't like incentivize that early on for me.
Agreed. There's a lot of early game issues with this, but once
yeah,
you
like-
get into the true like middle meat of this game, I feel like I couldn't imagine not being incentivized to explore because exploring aimlessly unlike in a lot of other games where the zones are so large that exploring aimlessly means you're kind of just exploring spaces similar to the other spaces you found,
Right.
more like item hunting really than anything. In this game, exploring aimlessly, especially since there's always gradation between the zones, like you'll go into the city waterways and then you'll start seeing mushrooms show up and you'll slowly transition into the mushroom zone.
Right.
In this game, exploring aimlessly always kind of just like blows your mind because you appear somewhere completely different and like visually striking from where you were before.
I can't say that it ever blew my mind, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't like the Howling Cliffs? Did you ever get there?
That sounds really familiar. Can you describe it visually?
The
to me?
far left part of the map.
It's like
yes.
yeah, it's like where your character jumps down from at the beginning. of the
yeah,
game.
because after I got the wall jump, I was just fucking around, being like, "Oh, can I just get there?"
Right.
Turns out, yes. And then if you keep going left far enough, you get a whole new zone just from bullshitting around.
Yeah,
like,
I didn't find that till I unlocked the stag nest for finding all the stations.
oh yeah. Yeah, there's so many times this game rewarded my like ambient environmental bullshittery on like 9 tiers beyond what I expected to be rewarded for.
You know, yeah, I felt that pull really strong, like, after City of Tears.
Yeah.
Like, I had, like, no idea where to go, but I just kept finding new places, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, how far does this go? And, like, finding the tram was, like, a cool experience to me, because, like...
Which tram?
Like, the initial, like, getting the pass. Like, finding the abandoned station in Deep Nest and, like, getting the pass and be like, oh, shit. Like, I don't... Something about that was just, like, a really cool... I didn't expect to find, like, a
tram
yeah,
pass?
like a tram pass just laying around.
You never expect to find. That's like kind of the beauty of the world design, which is something that we'll probably talk about at like a more detail in a bit. But like the fact that you never really expect to, given like the nature of this game, you never expect to find like anything that you do. Like it's always shocking. Like the first time that you run across something that's just like requires a token donation of Geo to activate, you're like, what? Like I thought I was in like a busted ass dead forest. Like why can I call a bug to pick me up?
Yeah, I loved the visual joke of like the first time you pay for a bench and one just like shoots up out of the ground and folds out. Yeah, that was really funny.
Yeah.
Um
In exploration, did you ever get trapped anywhere, Andy?
No. But I'm usually not the kind of person that tries to push the limits of a game. Like I
fair.
rarely ever experience bugs like that.
I didn't know that you could use the downward slash on spikes at all. And also
I learned that pretty late as well.
I also didn't know if you did that it would give you upward momentum. So I got trapped in the ancient basin like way earlier than I should have been for a long time, and I couldn't get out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you do them on the, you can use the downward slash on the little mush puffs. I don't know.
Those pink boingy mushrooms.
Yeah,
that took me so long to figure out.
Me too. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yep.
That was once I figured that out. Like that area became like one of we can get into why I didn't really love that area, but I liked the movement in that area a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the part of the game that made me realize that playing it with the analog stick was wrong and playing with the D-pad is the right way to go.
I fucking stubbornly, even when the game shrieked that at me mechanically as loud as it could in the White Palace, I was like, no, use an analog stick.
I'm like shocked because like I am like a very stubborn like all analog stick all the time kind of guy.
Yeah.
But like I started playing with the D-pad when like the downward like jumping on the mushrooms is really difficult for me.
You end up like swinging
with the
forward
analog
instead.
stick. Yeah, that annoyed me so much that I switched to the D-pad and then like immediately realized that like, oh, I'm just like better at this game now. Like it's so much better with
It's
the
just
D-pad.
way more precise.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god. No. Yeah. So now if I try to boot it up now and play with the analog stick, I'm like, oh god, this is awful.
I kind of default to the D-pad. What up?
I find that I'm kind of like drifting to that side in more recent years.
And it depends on the game.
In a
obviously.
2D game.
Yeah, in a
3D
2D game, you feel
would
like
never, ever, obviously want to do that.
most of the time it wouldn't even do anything.
Right.
Like it would
Be your item selection menu or
Right.
something. Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. I would say that we can all kind of agree that this game does a lot more with the Metroidvania structure than at least probably any of us have seen, where it uses the fact that you have access to this big open map with all of these things that you want to get to actually kind of guide you into places that you didn't expect or know that you wanted to go.
Yeah.
That was my big thrust of this conversation.
Because the game is so selective about its fast travel mechanisms, and because of the way the bench system works, it feels like a true adventure to me when I was going through it in the mid game, because it was possible to just like fuck up and get stuck somewhere forever. Like, I love the concept of that. It's such like a player unfriendly thing comparatively, right? For you to be able to go a certain direction and then just be like, oh no, I fell down a big hole and can't get out of the big hole. Right. But like, that makes the best stories.
I feel like at this point people should probably realize that the majority of us, or all of us, the majority of the time, are in favor generally of player unfriendly mechanical decisions.
Yeah,
because there's always something in a lot of games that we really like that we're like, oh, I really like the fact that if you do this, it fucks with you horribly.
Yeah. I feel like the more you play games, the more likely you are to like interesting things like that. Though.
Yeah. Something that breaks for the mold is
Yeah.
really what it is.
But no, I loved that I was able to like stumble into Deep Nest and like find that dreamer, like go through that whole temple or whatever, and like before I ever even had the dream nail.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, like I went there like right after City of Tears.
Jeez.
And like got into that temple all the way through it to the end. There's just like this sleeping like spider woman or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, what do I do with this? But yeah, like and I also found the knight that lets you access the White Palace. I think also before I had the dream nail. So I think those were big motivators to explore for me.
If you playing other Metroidvanias is anything to go on, because unlike a lot of the time,
it's actually not so much. I found myself like it's clicking now.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's like
I don't know if it's that or if it's just this game is so much more your style than most of the ones that we've played.
I can't imagine someone making a Metroidvania that's more up my alley than this one.
True. Yeah. The questions that this game asks that are supposed to trigger exploration on the player's part are so much better questions than so many other assumptions. Because, like, in Metroid Prime, you explore... Generally, you know kind of where you want to go.
Occasionally, there's just a fucking stamp on the map. But...
Yeah, it's just like, go here, go this direction. And the, like, general, broader exploration outside of the expected path of the game is just, like, to see if I can find an energy tank or something like that. But, like, this game, you'll find, like, 7 zones if you do that.
Or sometimes just, like, a creepy girl mining and singing a song, which is great, too.
She was not creepy until she attacked you.
Okay, fair enough.
She was a nice, beautiful person.
Actually, not fair enough. I'm pretty sure that she was creepy the whole time. Have
This
you
song-
seen
no.
enough horror movies that, like, children singing is just
And she was
completely
singing
unsettling?
creepy fairy tales about
Oh, yeah.
death.
Yeah, and you listen
nursery
to the
rhymes,
lyrics
not
there.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean there was definitely a creepy undertone there.
Yeah.
Look,
Oh, I agree she was likable and cute.
I get that, but I'm saying in her defense, all nursery rhymes are creepy.
Fairly.
Literally all.
This
Most nursery rhymes are about death as well.
Yes.
That's true, but like this one's like more explicit about it.
Yes, because you don't have the cultural awareness. Because everyone your whole life hasn't been singing to you like
Is
sit
the
down, my daughter,
cultural
2 by
awareness
2.
of this society just talk about death explicitly often?
There are literally zombies underneath where they sleep.
This has to be a new thing, though, right?
Yeah.
Like this wasn't like an ancient civilization. This is somebody who's survived from like the old world.
Fair.
Yeah.
But there's
All right,
whatever.
but-
We're getting into a lore tangent now.
Yeah, what we're gonna do
and
is
it's
take
also-
a break.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's also a little bit weird that she's just like blissfully mining away and just not acknowledging that everyone else that she knows is a mindless zombie.
Look, she is a miner, okay? She mines.
True.
She's a minor, and she's also a minor character.
The miner.
The minor
The
character.
underminer. He's beneath you, but nothing is beneath
below
him.
Yeah, break time.
Yeah, Andy
We'll come back and
demands
talk
break.
about other stuff.
Yeah.
This is the the most like haphazard break we've ever had.
This is
Whatever.
Standing up and it's like fucking break.
This is the no clip emergency break.
This is the break
Yeah.
that was promised to me.
The emergency Welcome back from the break. One of the things that we talked about a couple of times, but didn't really get into mechanically. I don't even know that the mechanics are really that important in this discussion, but the idea of charms and sort of there being the way that your character makes progression for the most part, albeit outside of like your bog standard Metroidvania progression of just getting more health and ammo.
Right, but it's important to note with the way that progression works in this game that's super limited. The difference between a starting bare bones character with nothing and an end game character with everything that is just like the standard upgrade items is just one essentially backup soul circle that you can store and 4 more masks, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you start with 5 masks and 1 circle. So you double your soul and you slightly more than double your health, and that's it. And if you compare it to something like Metroid, that's a ridiculously small amount of progression. So the charms are most of the way that you change your character.
And it's also my favorite progression system I've seen in a game in like a bazillion jillion years. Specifically because of just how goddamned interesting it is to have your abilities be endlessly interchangeable and your progression just being your ability to mix other abilities, like fold it in. So that you don't have a build like you would in an RPG, and you also don't have like a stat tree like you do in also RPGs, but also it's 2018, so every game you've ever played.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to upgrade it, and you can, like, miss shit, so you don't, like, it's not like at the end of the game, I'm level 10, I can wear all the charms. Like, you can never expect to have everything available to you. And in fact, you have, like, a comically small number of your potential abilities allotted to you as you progress through the game. And I absolutely love it. Like, I really like it.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't waste like a slot for the entire time that I played on just the like geomagnet one, because I needed it.
I read things online about everyone doing that. I never touched that.
I used it for a significant chunk of the game as well.
I felt like I wasn't playing the game okay. I mentioned that I died like a million times to like the third boss. I was bad at the beginning of this game, and additionally lost all of the geo that I made from the first boss and everything leading up to it without spending any of it. It was like 500 or so, or 600, something like that.
That hurts.
Just because I was playing it with lag, which was a problem that I corrected later. I texted Andy, I remember being like, the roly-poly enemies are the hardest enemies in any game ever. Because I couldn't hit them. Like, I would, like, try and, like, run away and then turn around and hit them, and I couldn't turn around in time. But it was just because there was, like, a few milliseconds of lag between my, like, input and the thing happening. And then once I started playing it directly on my computer monitor, they were real easy.
And this is why the Steam link is currently on sale for $1 with the purchase of Hollow Knight.
Yeah. Because the Steam Link is imperfect technology, and you drop 99% of the frames. But I felt like the geomagnet really helped me because, like, the thing that I was doing to get myself injured the most was chasing after shit that fell, and I didn't want to have to redo platforming sections just because, like, a particularly juicy enemy happened to fall in between the cracks, and I had to go get his loot.
Right, and those little clumps of geo that you can just, like, bust.
Fly all over the
geo
goddamn
just,
place.
like, spews halfway across the room. There's, like, the geomagnet made actually interacting with those not annoying.
Yeah, I do agree that those seem to erupt for no clear reason.
Have you played, I feel like, Andy, you've played Shovel Knight. Not to bring
Yeah.
another Knight game into this conversation.
I've played like a third of it.
Yeah. So in Shovel Knight, they have like those little treasure things, and you dig them up, and like treasure kind of like falls near you, and you run back and forth, pick it up. So that is like what the Geo rocks are, but then they're mixed with the coin battle from Super Smash Brothers, where coins just fucking explode all over the place, and you're like, how do I get all these coins?
It's like when Sonic gets hit and all his rings fly. Like that's what happens with the Geo.
You're like, there's like a 40% of like a 40% chunk of these that I'm just sacrificing because there's no way I'm gonna go get them.
Right, yeah.
So the Geomagnet was like, it at least like helped me feel like I was making progress,
Right.
instead of being a jackass.
Yeah, but I felt like the charms kind of had that problem of there were just too many of them comparative to like how many you could equip. Like
Sure.
it incentivized that kind of behavior, at least that it does in me with systems like this in games where I just find a couple that I like and then just never experiment with the rest of them. Like I found the one like for like the Dash Master, and I'm like, this seems like a cool, useful charm. But then like I never tried it out because like I had my like standard like go-to charms already.
I had an experience similar to the pins from The World Ends With You, where I would try all of the new ones that I found, but found myself going back to ones that I liked a lot. Dashmaster was one that I did use for a lot of it, just because I liked being able to dash more.
Yeah, I use like the boring ones that probably everyone uses, which is like
Damage up.
long slash,
Yeah, long
like
now.
quick soul refill, you know, like those ones that
I-
are like just make your most used abilities that little bit more efficient.
I wanted them to go more all out with, and by more all out I mean at all, with dumb puns. Because I was really hoping there was going to be like a charm that like the long nail, where you would be able to like slash it and go a little bit further, but like let you grab onto a wall with it and call it the hang nail.
You went really far for that, Joe.
I did, yeah.
You were truly reaching.
You have no idea how long I thought about, is there going to be a charm called hang nail while I was playing it?
Maybe in the Hornet DLC, because she actually throws her nail into stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get a hang nail.
Maybe there will be a
It's still
hangnail.
possible.
God, I hope it doesn't happen. Thanks, JJ.
Yeah. In my case with the charms, I also had bog standard sets, but I found myself, especially considering how difficult a lot of the challenges were in this game, doing some pretty extreme variation. Because unlike a lot of the other RPG systems that you normally encounter in games of this kind of difficulty, that have like sunk costs that keep you from truly trying to experiment, this game has like no sunk costs really.
You just
So-
have to find a bench.
Yeah.
That's it.
So you can switch around at your leisure. Especially in some of the harder bosses, would switch my entire approach many times trying to get through them. The things that I used the most were like the fast slash, the fast health recharge thing, and a couple of others situationally as the game went on. Oh, and Grub Song, of course, because Grub Song is the best charm in the game by a huge margin. Especially when you're going through
What does that one
mid-progression.
do?
You get 15% of a circle charge every time you take damage.
That's right. Yeah, I was gonna say I know I used that one, but I can't remember
Yeah.
the specific.
There's
like-
also ones that just like recharge soul over time,
Yeah.
which is like an interesting subversion of what it seems to be the entire mechanical premise of this game.
Yeah, but that was the last charm you get.
Yeah.
And even then, you actually, if you want to get the cool ending, you have to give that charm up. So it's still
Right.
fine. But did you guys figure out the overcharm system?
Oh, where you could equip an additional thing and it takes double damage.
Yeah.
I never, ever would have figured that out on my own.
My girlfriend's cat walked on my controller while I was sitting. It was like in my lap, and then it like went over, and when I was trying to do the charm stuff, and it just happened. He just happened to fuck with it enough while I was trying to like get him in that I saw like a purple light flash while I kept trying to equip it at that time, and I was like, hold on. And then even though did not force my cat to continue pressing the button.
If your cat had just beaten the game for you, that would have been way better. Yeah.
It would have. But no, I pressed it instead of the cat after that point and was like, oh, this is neat. But then I only used it one time ever.
I couldn't justify it. I was too bad at this game to, like, want to take the penalty of taking additional damage.
Yeah, I didn't know about it till after I'd finished the game, so...
Yeah.
Right.
It was the only time
I don't think I would have used it anyway.
I only used it when I did that, like, Grey Mourner get across the entire world sub mission or whatever. Did you ever find her?
No, I didn't do that.
Oh, do you know about it?
I feel like I may have heard somebody mention this.
Oh, yeah, there's a mission you can go on that's somewhat secret you can find.
Oh, with the flower?
Yeah, and if you take...
yes, I did do this.
Okay, yeah. So
I thought you meant like something about like using the flying ability to fly all the way from one end of the map to the other.
No. It was just if you take damage, you lose the flower,
Yeah.
so there's no reason not to try and overcharm for it. So I used like a completely different weird build for that. I liked a lot of the way that they had this little side quests forcing you to do different things and different approaches. Like I said before, I switched my charms a whole lot over the course of the game. I ended up beating the final boss with a set of charms I would have never used before, which was like just trying to manipulate your spells a whole lot.
Yeah, the only boss that I felt like I didn't feel any incentive to change mine, like ever, on the opposite end, where like I felt like if I was having trouble, it was just because like I just needed to get good.
Right.
I just needed to play better.
Well, I feel like changing your charms out, especially when you're doing like repeated boss runs, almost hurts more than it helps sometimes because you aren't learning how to like handle the thing with the tools you have. You're changing your tools so it kind of refreshes the learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
Fair.
I didn't really have that experience and did change charms occasionally for bosses, but didn't. I suspect that could lend itself to just being like walled by something forever.
This game has a surprisingly large ability for the like Souls-like genre that it purports to be in, of allowing you to brute force situations that seem hard. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of bosses that I never felt like I actually, after the fact, had truly attained enough mastery of to feel like I earned the win against them, but I beat just through like the Joni's Blessing charm and like things that give you a whole lot of extra masks and just like damage up and the fast last. And
there's a lot of like I felt like this game didn't really feel like it was that hard until you do like the late game like optional stuff.
Yeah, because the Hollow Knight himself, like the actual the floor you need to get past to beat the game at all is actually not very hard. There's a lot of reasons they couldn't make the Hollow Knight himself that difficult of a fight, but it was by the end of that became like robotic for me getting through that.
Yeah.
Like it was very easy.
It kind of got it's a Gwyn situation.
What is a Gwyn situation?
Where Gwyn isn't that hard of a boss in comparison to like everything leading up to him. I feel like, albeit as somebody who did not play the Hollow Knight boss,
I'm actually one of those people that think that Gwyn is actually a pretty hard boss.
Me too.
But
you
whatever.
watched me play Gwyn. You know I think Gwyn is hard. I feel like I'd have a much easier time with him now that I've played every other Dark Souls game. But yeah. I don't think that having bosses that you have to get really familiar with in order to beat is like a staple of the genre either. I think that it's just sort of a side effect of good boss design a lot of the time.
Right.
Like, look at Dark Souls 2. Like, 2/3 of the bosses in that game are just kind of trashy garbage that you don't have to learn. You just have to go in and just kill it like a regular enemy and walk away.
Yeah, but there were too many times I felt like in Hollow Knight, because of how high the ceiling could get through charm combinations and nail upgrades, where I really did feel like I could just out DPS the boss, and I just had a long enough invulnerability frames from after taking damage that if I just like sat there and just freaking spammed it.
There were a lot of bosses where you had like a window where you could just like whack the boss like 8 times in a row, like for free.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I beat BioShock with a wrench. Like, good games can have systems that are exploitable.
Right.
Fair. And I do think this is a very, very good game. I almost wish that the game had exerted a little bit more pressure on me at different times. It might even be specifically a problem with that Joni's Blessing charm of all the charms. But it felt like I was getting off a little bit too easy, and then the Radiance happened, and I never got off with anything easy ever again. Oh my god, was that hard? Maybe the hardest... That may be the most attempts I've ever made on any boss in any game. I sat there for like 5 hours trying the Radiance.
Are you talking about most attempts, individual attempts, or most time spent on a single boss?
Individual attempts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I probably... That has to go for Santa Claus, the boss of the West in Hyper Light Drifter for me. But
God.
The iteration time was so fast on it that it probably took me like an hour and a half, but I died like 40
That's something that's like... that I really dislike about the Radiance as a boss is that you have to go kill the Hollow Knight first before you can fight him.
It had
Or her
one
again,
fantastic side effect for me, which is that it turned essentially the Hollow Knight boss into like a grade school bully simulation for me. Because every time what would happen after so many iterations, like after iteration 10 of the time, every time I lost, I was just filled with like a deep personal primal rage. And I had gotten the systems down so that like as soon as I respond, you just jump off, dash twice, kill the thing, go into the crystal mode, and then fling. So it took like literally 6 seconds to get back into the boss fight after you lost to the Radiance.
Right.
So the anger was still like fresh within me.
Right.
So it was all just me entering a room with like just
punching bag.
pure rage while like an incredibly easy boss stood in my way. Like by the end of it, especially since like him, I also just kind of would spam through him to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It just felt like I was pinning him against the wall and just like punching his stupid broken face over and over again until he let me through 40 times in like 3 hours.
Related to that, I found that and the Hollow Knight specifically, that boss fight, I found that when I started the game, I felt like the art style made the knight look sort of like cute and bewildered, like he didn't know what he was getting into. Mm-hmm. When you get to the Hollow Knight, and who has like kind of an animalistic quality to it, him, her, I don't know if it's actually stated.
I don't know if it even has a gender or whatever.
Where it kind of like jumps back and forth and like attacks in like a fury,
Yeah.
It makes the knight, your character, seem like a sociopath. Because it just had like the dead eyes and calculated like very short, quick attacks.
Yeah, that's one of my actual favorite things about the game is where realizing what your character is.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. It, especially since it's literally a mask. What your character is,
yeah.
like realizing that you are essentially a homunculus designed to pretend to be a bug and has no emotions or feelings at all. Mm-hmm. Great way to justify a silent protagonist in any game. Mm-hmm. Just be like, you were designed to have no personality.
So, I watched a little bit of a lore video on this game.
Yeah.
And apparently what the Hollow Knight is made of is the black abyss water.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and apparently it's malleable and you can fashion a living being out of it.
Tons of things. The Collector is made of that stuff.
Yep. You can find the mold which created the Collector's body in the game.
Good lore. Solid lore in this game. Although I have nuances with that. But
shoutouts to the mask making bug also for being the creepiest fucking thing in the whole world.
Oh, you knocked off the mask?
Yeah?
How did you just figure that out?
No. That was a lie. I just found it online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know he could do. I thought he just didn't do anything.
Oh, he does one thing, which is if you
scare your balls off.
Yeah. It's because afterwards I had so many, as we'll get to later, so many questions left in my mind of wait, this doesn't make sense in the narrative, that I started Googling stuff and experience and to try and fill in the gaps of the narrative experience of the game. So if you go back to the Mask Maker and do a Desolate Dive, I don't know why it has to specifically be that move. His mask gets knocked off and you see his face beneath, and it's just this makes it sound comical when it's actually deeply, deeply horrifying. But his eyes are the spirals that people would normally use to hypnotize other people. You know what I'm
Okay.
talking about? The black and white spirals
Yeah.
that twist in haunted houses. His eyes are like both of those, and he talks a lot of lore nonsense that's very creepy in context.
Just his character's like dialogue when you walk in the first time is creepy and weird.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I used
So-
to kind of assume that he was like a DLC thing or something. Like I thought that they just hadn't implemented what they wanted to with him.
But easily my favorite like lore touch in the entirety of the game is the way that the game made use for just one moment in really important ways.
Loretouched sounds like a bespoke Monster Energy drink based on Game Fuel, where it comes in like a tall 10-ounce can that's really thin, has like all like matte black. It's flavored like pomegranate or something.
Shut up.
Game Fuel Loretouched.
Whatever.
I like it.
But the way that they're like, and they only did this once, which made it so impactful. Where most of the time they'll be like just like tiny little narrative quips. If you check the Hunter's Journal, like to read up information about the things that you fight, it's not nearly as
I
rewarding.
say, but I did never do that. But yeah.
yeah, you kill the black things in the abyss, and they're
Ghosts.
siblings. That is the name of that enemy, siblings, and it's so good, so good.
Yeah, this game is inherently creepy in like a lot of ways.
It's got that quality where it like slowly waves over you, which is what makes it so effective.
Yes.
Right. It is the anti-Earthbound. It's not like a neck breaking like
I would say
tonal
it's
whiplash.
exactly like Earthbound, where like there's like little seeds of it kind of sprinkled in everywhere, and then like it kind of like the realization of like there's creepy shit going on here kind of like waves over you.
Agreed. The first time it truly hit me deeply was when I found the Tower of Love and was like listening
yeah.
and trying to figure out like I literally, because again Rachel was always with me, so I literally just like stopped and was just like unplugged my headphones and then just turned around to her and was like, what does this mean? And like, listen to this. It's like some kind of like crazy schizophrenic prostitute that I assume is behind this door. It was not a schizophrenic prostitute.
No, it wasn't.
But it was almost as good, which is fine in my
Yeah,
book.
I found that place
As
before I got
good.
the key, and then like completely like spatially forgot where it was. Like I was like, where was that?
Welcome to a lot of the time I'm
Because
playing a
you
Metroidvania
you
game.
have to access it from the Kingdom's Edge area. Like you can't get to it from City of Tears. So I'm like running around City of Tears, being like, where the fuck was that tower or whatever it's called?
Yeah. Anyway, while we seem to be on general lore appreciation time, which this game totally deserves, this game, playing through it, started to change my opinion on like the vague lore. What do we even call it? It's not really a trend.
the vague lore.
Yeah, but the increasing Dark Souls-esque approach to making your narrative.
Environmental storytelling, like lore and backstory.
Yeah, but more specifically than that, not just any environmental storytelling, but environmental storytelling where the player is actively incentivized to put the pieces together themselves, and without outside help, you'll probably never get the full story. But while you're playing through it, you have a lot of active questions about what's going on that are supposed to propel you forward into further explanation, into being more invested with what's going on.
Right.
I'm beginning to get the opinion that that general approach, while fantastic in the middle of the experience, is becoming increasingly either hard to do effectively or maybe just innately by the style not rewarding to me after the fact. Like when I was in Hollow Knight going through this stuff, I cared so much about what was going on and all the things that like all what these symbols mean, who these people are, what could happen in the future. Like the possibility space seemed so open because it seemed like this is a game where anything could happen. NPCs could die, leave, change. Nothing seemed static, so everything seemed possible in the same way that a lot of these vague lore games are. But now that I know that I have as many of the pieces that I'm going to get for the puzzle, I kind of just feel like a lot of the questions that were the driving force behind me playing the game are not.
Hollow.
I hate you so much. But yes, this is completely correct. But like not just in the same way that things aren't going to get answers. I feel like there might not have been answers in the first place, or that the narrative might just have not been managed fully.
I'm going to let you go first
Alright,
because this probably relates more to the game at hand.
Okay. Well, my opinion on that is like I kind of agree, but I feel like it's kind of understandable because doing storytelling in this way is super hard, and I think people oftentimes have liked it and like want to do it themselves and don't implement it as well. Like that was one of my biggest problems with Hyperlight Drifter. I think they didn't accomplish it that well. I think this game does a much better job of it.
Well, my thing was just, in comparison to other games, I feel like I like the way that this game does its... What are we... Veglore?
Veglore.
Yeah, that does its Veglore. I like games like this and Inside. The way that they do this situation where they set up a world, and there may not be an answer to everything, and it shouldn't matter because it does such a good job of setting the tone, like the theme, making the atmosphere feel like a real place.
Agreed.
And why I actually disliked, especially in the first Dark Souls when I played it originally, and Hyperlight Drifter is a really good example that I forgot about, games where there kind of is an answer if you dig far enough, because I don't like the idea of taking a game that is just not about gathering clues and putting together a narrative and making it about that. I'd much rather be your character's story through the game, and what you can glean from what you're like given is so much more effective.
I agree, but I feel like there are ways narratively that you expect the stories of the people around you that you're piecing together to intersect with you. And to illustrate that, the biggest example of what I think is like a true narrative hole, like a mismanagement of this game, is the way that Hollow Knight narratively handles the Pale King, like the king that's supposed to be the guy that comes up.
Right.
His true absence is never really explained in a way that I found interesting or meaningful, and the way that he is constantly built in the narrative, he appears as if he is a force that you are going to have to oppose or encounter. He seems like a thing that you're going to have to deal with, and part of the cause not only of like your creation, but the catalyst of huge things that are going on in this world. And I can understand why you'd want to push back on the Dark Souls approach, where it seems like you're piecing together ancient stories of ancient people who are doing things.
Right.
And I can get wanting to push back on that. But this is a game in which I feel like what you were trying to piece together are the narrative forces that you were interacting with, right? Like you were piecing together what the Radiance even was, what it did, and what it means, and it paid off when you finally found it. But I feel like there are other things in this game narratively that don't pay off in that same way, like the Pale King, in which it feels like the game is building up to you interacting with this force that has been so often like mentioned and brought up as a thing that you're going to have to deal with, and then it just doesn't happen.
Right. I think that this is one of the situations where I actually benefit from having not completed the game, because I did not have that immense disappointment.
Right.
I just heard about it.
Yeah. You just got the cool parts. You got the vague interconnecting structure and all the questions. Like
Right.
when I went through the game and before my post-game lore search, I kind of just assumed that the King and the Radiance were the same thing, which I hear is kind of a common thing. But it seems like messy narratively that they ever decided to separate those into opposing forces in the first place in all of the background story. It makes it a lot... It makes the through line of what you're trying to oppose a whole lot muddier in a way that I don't think is necessarily rewarding in a game like this where you're fighting bosses a lot of the time.
Right.
I just had, like I said, it just feels unfinished to me. And that's okay with a game where the amount that they've accomplished is already staggering considering their resources. But I do think there's room for narrative improvement. And I'm worried that it might be inherent to this like vague lore story structure, because this is kind of the same way that I felt at the end of Dark Souls 3.
Okay.
For a lot of the same reasons, where I feel like there's lots of pieces, but a lot of pieces don't make sense with each other. Like in Hollow Knight specifically, if the Pale King was trying to make everyone forget about what the Radiance was, why are there fucking images of the Radiance literally everywhere? Why is it on every gravestone, every stained glass window?
Right.
Like, there's lots of little stuff like that I feel like the real explanation for why they're there isn't in character, it's out of character. It's because they were making a game. And
So, yeah. What I was saying before was it's really hard to do this kind of storytelling well. And I feel like one of the things that, at least for me, really makes it work with like Dark Souls is the community. The fact that the game is so popular and there's so many people talking about it. So if like you're in a kick where you're like, oh yeah, this all this is really interesting, you're speculating about it, you can jump online and you can find a million other people talking about the same shit, and like that's a really satisfying experience because it feels like people working together to kind of like figure this out, and it's like it scratches that itch that you have to like gain more insight into it.
yeah.
Not to mention things like the message system are kind of like the push pins. Like, this seems important, so people will like say like, look at this, like, remember this place,
Right.
shit like that.
so-
Hollow Knight has nothing like
And I
that.
say, yeah, it might be just almost impossible to do that with an indie game, like in the same way. And the other thing was, in the lore video that I watched, so take this with a grain of salt, it's some guy said this on the internet.
Yeah.
I did not fact check him.
Unlike us, just
Yeah.
accept everything we say
Yeah,
as
but
fact.
when I say it, it'll be true right now. But
That's how facts work.
apparently,
We're offering our services for $50 per fact.
but when they were designing this game, apparently they just came up with like cool ideas for bosses and like concepts for things that they just like thought were interesting, and then went in and looked at what they had and came up with the lore from there. So it wasn't like a complete like narrative or backstory from the start. It was kind of like filled in as they went along.
And that is the approach that almost every game designer should take, in my opinion. Like, you could always... Lore is flexible. This is a lot of thing that people, especially when you get into the minutia of these kind of discussions, fail to really appreciate. You can make the flavor of any mechanic set, you can bend that really far. You can make you can link mechanics to ideas in ways that players will accept just because of how they're presented really easily. But it's very hard to go in reverse. It's very hard to constantly fit mechanics to lore repeatedly over and over again. And I think it's, like, especially considering their resources, responsible of them to put the game first in a way that made the core moment-to-moment experience rewarding, and then attempt to, be creative and use what they had to build off of that. Like, I think this is generally the right approach to go about it. I'm just kind of sad that they couldn't... Like, I felt like there were ways they could have made things fit together artistically that would have felt more rewarding to me at the end that they didn't for one reason or another. That's all. And I really want in the future for games that attempt to be this vague I want other people to think about it for a longer period of time and give back to me about whether or not it's possible to make games that are vague like this that can still be a rewarding experience after the fact. So, because there's a difference, right? Like, Dark Souls 3 still had that huge community.
Yeah,
But-
that is true.
Yeah. And I just don't know, like, what's the difference, right? Like, what really matters in your ability to piece things together? Because players will go real far to piece things together. See,
I feel like this is probably an unfair comparison, all things considered, because even if players do go really far to piece together the lore of Dark Souls games, the lore of Dark Souls games has, like, shifted pretty dramatically over the course of time. Hollow Knight's an individual, like, one point in its own timeline. So I guarantee you there are people out there who are trying to figure stuff out, but if a word comes down from on high saying, like, we mostly just sort of pick things to fit what we had mechanically, a lot of those people are gonna give up.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what happened here, is that it just wasn't incentivized.
Yeah, and like
Which I think
I
is
think
a good thing.
Dark
personally.
Souls is like a unique case because I think like Miyazaki and his team that like come up with the stories for those games are just like the best at it. Like they're really good at like building a narrative to be vague and incomplete like that from the start. And I think it works in like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne really well, but not so much Dark Souls 3. And I think the reason for that specifically is because it kind of collapsed under its own weight. Like they felt like they had to tie up loose ends and bring in stuff that referenced the first game and the second game begrudgingly, and and they had to do its own thing. I think it just became too bloated to manage well.
The charitable reading of it, I think, is that they wrote Dark Souls 3 as a love letter to the franchise as opposed to the way that it was created originally as like they had written all this stuff in order to create a depth for a game that was in itself like whole. And Hollow Knight was written from a game that was whole, and then they just stuffed some stuff in it to make it successfully. Like that'd be demeaning to it. Just to make the game feel more tonally alive.
I'd also like to distinguish here between our discussions of the lore and the writing, because the writing in this game is no business being as good as it is. Like, I was constantly shocked. Like, they're freaking considering the job that I work. Like, I had to keep Googling what words mean. Like, I haven't done that since I had to do the GRE. Like, that's just not a thing I do. I was... the vocabulary of this game is fantastic. The way that it helps set the tone for like this place being like a serious, solemn, desolate place, even though everyone's like these cute little bugs that flick around.
Right.
Like I really love the way that this game is written.
Yeah, I found myself like reading literally everything. Where in a lot of games like this, they can get a little text heavy, where like characters give like long-winded like speeches. Like I can kind of mash through it a bit. But I did not do that with this game, which I think is a testament to its writing.
Indeed.
I think we're running up kind of on the long side at this point. So what do we have that's like important to go over?
Oh god, I have so many tiny silly things.
We've like mentioned the art. Like, do we want to say anything specific about it, or just other than it's really great?
It is really great because you made the somewhat. Well, entirely, but I'm trying to be charitable. Incorrect distinction of saying that it was like pixel based when it is like a drawn style. The fact that it is makes this so glorious in so many ways.
Yeah.
Because things. How do I describe it? The way that one of the things I was very impressed about now. Not mechanically so much, but the enemy variety in this game I thought was, like, visually was really good. I thought that, like, from one area to another, you're finding these things that are differently unique. Like, they have, it's not just like, these are the forest variety of the city enemies. Everything was, like, acted and behaved and looked vastly differently. And I thought that the style that this game has, like, the way that everything is... actually designed is things kept being more than you would expect them to, and it never stopped being interesting to me. So like early on the charging like bush enemies that were just like one little dude, the like worms that sit around and do nothing but then like have big pincers that come up and like thrash at you. It's all just like glorious and good.
I don't know what those bush enemies are called, but I think it's funny that they're like ambushes.
That is actually really good.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And if that isn't the name of them, it should be.
But yeah, no, the game has like an incredible like art direction.
Incredible
art direction. Like the way that like zones like fade in like from one to another is really great, and the way it all has that like cohesive art direction is it's fantastic.
Color palette's fantastic.
Yeah, color palette's good. Character design is pretty great.
Used to its best when it constantly contrasts with the dream sequences in the final Radiance fight. Mm-hmm. Like that name card that comes up where like things are serious because it's no longer because everything is bright and beautiful now. Like so good.
Even when you get the dream nail like the first time and you kind of just go into like kaleidoscope mode.
Yeah.
Like that was like so jarring and played really well, I thought. Like against the like what you basically have been going through before that, which was like I don't know. I keep trying to compare it to something because it kind of reminds me of some stuff, but not. It's like Edmund McMillan by way of Jonan Vasquez, if that means anything to anyone.
We'll find out soon. Email us with what you think that means.
We'll send a great job email back.
We will.
That's a 60 episode long callback.
I want to praise the concept of the Dream Nail in the first place, by the way. Good on them for being creative enough to get out of the audio log box. Because that is exactly the purpose the Dream Nail serves, as a way to get in the head of like living or even not living characters that are around you.
Right.
And it's great because you don't get it immediately. You get it later, and you feel like you have so much insight into everyone else around you after that point.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I didn't really realize you could do it until like way late in the game, so I didn't end up doing it a lot personally.
What if you went to charge the Dream Nail and he like did the like you hold the button and he like ugh, and then he just puts it on a record player and it plays an audio log?
It's like the essence symbol, it's getting like a record. But we brought up the White Palace earlier. Did you want to say your piece on that, JJ?
Oh, God. I don't know how I could possibly talk about this game and have a podcast about it without also ragging on that until the end of my life.
What are we talking about next time?
The White Palace will go down in history as my exact example of the kind of platformer design that I do not like. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it is
Hard.
pixel perfect. Everything that I hate about hard platformers. Like contrasting that with Ori is a game with somewhat difficult platforming challenges that are made tense and hard for you by the existence of something that forces you to action, whether that be a time constraint, water flooding beneath you, an owl trying to eat you, or something like that.
Sure.
But you have lots of variability in what you can do and a lot of control over what you can do. The White Palace is you spend like 7 million years standing still while planning out what you're going to do and then failing at it 30 times and then doing it once by mostly luck and then moving on to the next thing. The one hallway, there is literally a hallway in the White Palace that is just buzzsaws that you have to stand like pixel perfect between or you die. Like that's the whole challenge, is like walk in between the saws and stand there and hope that you know your hitbox well enough that you won't die. And that's it. That's all. That's the whole. There's no tension, especially if you have like the hive blood charm. There's no like resource that you have to change.
That's a must for that.
Yes, and the high blood makes it even worse because you have to take like a 10-second break between every attempt.
Yeah.
So you just wallow in your failure for a little while before going back at it. It's 100% running to the Nightmare Headstone, the freaking hive blood situation in the White Palace.
I loved the White Palace. It was a total highlight of the game for me.
How? How can you love oh nope, I didn't. I was wrong pixel to the right.
Well, to be fair, you're awful at platformers because like Hollow Knight does actually offer you a lot of control over your character. Like you have control over your jump height by like how much you push in the button.
Right.
You have the double jump. You have the air dash. So like there were like a couple little instances where like there were 2 saw blades you had to jump through that was like stupidly hard. But like for the most part, I thought that was a really well designed platforming gauntlet, and I thought it was made like a highlight for me because it's optional endgame content. Like that's the kind of thing that I think the developers realized that like a decent percentage of people who play this game, that would be something that they would like enjoy.
Right.
So I like that they, because in the game's not really about the platforming, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought it was nice that they took that in consideration and put like a platforming gauntlet in as like a secret optional area.
All right.
I feel like your point about JJ being bad at platforming is accurate. I also know that you are generally more patient than I am. So I feel like, because what I saw was somebody who edited together a run where they didn't die because they didn't want to spend 30 minutes of a video standing between saw blades, presumably.
Yeah.
I get the impression from it that I would have put a controller through a wall.
100%.
Like, at some point.
It wasn't that bad.
You know how patient
I mean, yeah, 'cause I didn't do it, so it's
Yeah.
possible I would
Like,
have just breezed
I mean, it is very challenging, but like it is totally doable. Like it's not that bad.
1 pixel. You have 1 pixel.
That's such an exaggeration.
No, it is not.
Yes, it is.
I don't know.
Like that is not even close to like a go-to example in my mind for like pixel perfect platforming.
We'll see what history says about this. But also, hot take on what you said before, Andy. I don't think the White Palace is optional content because
You don't need to do any of that to beat the game.
I know you don't need to see the credits, but I don't think it's optional because I don't think beating this game without beating or experiencing at the very least, maybe not beating, but experiencing the Radiance. I think beating this game without seeing the Radiance would not be a true end to the game.
Well, I mean, sure, like, but it's all up to like it's the way the game's designed. That's all up to the player.
No, but not like I'm not speaking like. I mean,
Like you have
You're
the
not getting
option
it
to,
artistically.
yeah. I think,
it's up to the player whether or not they care about that.
but they may not even know. Right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Like, you get to the end, I feel like Hollow Knight is a boss that has to be easy enough that you can get through it every time to get to the Radiance, and beatable with a wide and diverse range of abilities that you don't have because of the way this game is designed as that open. So it was under a lot of restrictions, but it's still a lot easier than a lot of other challenges that you go through. I think that most players will go through by the end of the game. And I feel like just having the Hollow Knight by itself being the ending note of the experience would not be satisfying.
Well, they could have alternatively designed the boss to be harder and then put a checkpoint after him so you didn't have to fight him over and over again.
I kind of like that decision, but I like...
So, like, if you wanted to just beat the Hollow Knight and that be it, it's like a more...
Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to get to the Radiance, you have to, like, go inside the Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't think that there's a way to thematically
you leave
pull
his
off.
corpse there, and then you just whack the corpse with the dream nail.
I guess. It feels like it would be so thematically less...
It's way cooler the way it is.
Right.
Very much.
Like, I'll agree to that.
And
They probably had arguments about this while they were making it.
Yeah.
One of the ways that I like why it's set up currently is it feels like, because they nailed... For that sequence, for the pre-Radiance sequence...
I'm sorry.
What?
I'm sorry.
You said nailed, and like I raised my eyebrow.
Yeah. Like over there, it took me a second to realize what he was
Jesus.
referring to.
Yeah. I feel like they nailed the difficulty of the Hollow Knight as a pre-Radiance boss. I feel like it is exactly as challenging as I want it to be, which makes it feel to me like the perfect version of the run challenge back to the boss arena in like a Dark Souls game.
Right, the part that sucks.
Yeah, it feels like the absolute best version of that like slow build up to the hard thing, which is why I wouldn't want it to be absent. But I can totally see an argument for why you should have a checkpoint.
And like for somebody who's just going to like beat the Hollow Knight and be done with the game, like they're probably at like lower health and like not nearly as like overpowered, and the Hollow Knight will be harder for them. Yeah.
It depends. I guess I wish
and
I
that's a
had better-
Metroidvania problem too.
Yeah.
Like look at we talked about the
Omega
Metroid. Well, yeah, we talked about the Metroid Prime in that episode where it's like, remember when he does that charge move and no one has ever in a million years gotten hit by it? And it's like because the person playing might have 40 health and 25 missiles. Like you just have to like you can't let the player get completely walled off by something just because they didn't find your weird shit, like, hidden wall thing.
Yeah. It's an interesting challenge. I think and they did take measures, because in this game, to mitigate that classic Metroidvania problem, because the difference between a perfect character and a first-level character is, like, it's barely... It's the difference in any other game between, like, a first-level character and a third-level character. You just don't gain that much from exploration. But either way, My only takeaway from this is that I strongly believe that the Radiance is like the capstone of the experience of this game, and I would be like straight up sad if I had missed it.
Yeah.
I also kind of get the impression that the majority of people who are going to reach the end of the game, like reach Hollow Knight, likely are going to, at the very least, want to finish Radiance, because the game itself is, like, it is a game that is self-proclaimed as, like, a difficult game.
Yeah.
And not everyone who starts those games gets to the end of them.
Yeah.
I think if you do, then you're obviously dedicated enough to want to take on the optional thing.
Yeah.
A la the Moon Presence.
A la the Moon Presence. Blessed be its name.
Do we have final thoughts?
I don't feel like I have accented well enough how well the mid-game of Hollow Knight really, like, got to me personally and emotionally. Because, you know, we're talking about criticism here. We're discussing everything we can about what the game does, what it's trying to do, and its successes and failures. But it succeeded so hard during the middle exploration stages, which are the most important stage in any Metroidvania game, that, like, there is one specific sequence where, like, I unlocked the door to find this elevator all the way up to the singer, and the singer has no purpose other than just to sit there and sing. And it was like it really got to me in a very deep and personal way, considering the context of the lore and the narrative around that circumstance. That in a way that few games I have played generally, and even few on the cast have. Like, this is truly special, and while it's not one of my favorite games ever, it is a game I would recommend to anyone interested in the genre, and is, like, just laughable at the price. Like, if you get this thing for $10 and on sale, like, you should just be over the moon. This is, I would paid $80 for this game, and then I got it for $15.
By nearly every metric, the asking price of this game is, like, ludicrously low.
Yeah, it's like it's always on sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, if you are somebody who needs, like, a lot of game for your money, it has that. If you're just looking for a well-designed indie game, it is one of those. If you like playing video games because you played video games on the NES when you were 4 years old and they were really hard then, this game is also hard and will make you think back to the days when you didn't know what the fuck you were doing.
Hollow Knight will make you look back on your childhood with shame.
Exactly.
Our box quote.
I'm always good for this.
Yeah.
Now, I really, really liked this game. Like, I expected I would enjoy it because I'm usually good at being able to tell if I'm going to like a thing. But I liked this way more than I expected to. Like, it really delivered. Like, the quality of the game, like, just did not cease to keep impressing me throughout the whole playthrough. And, like, yeah, like, the scope and everything. Like, this is... It's really impressive. Like, and like JJ said, it's not one of my favorite games, but I would also recommend it to anybody. Like, it's just really unique. There's no other indie game quite like it, in my opinion.
And I think that is the message that you should take from this podcast, as my opinion on this game is going to be by far the most irrelevant. This game didn't click with me. Very few games that, like, rely on challenge for, like, their main mechanics really do. And this is one of those games that I just never was able to, like, gather the will to want to actually get that much better at. So, yeah, I also was very impressed by the general, like, quality of every little thing that was in the game. From the artwork to the world design, every bit of it seemed unique and interesting, and that is ultimately why I think this game is really good, but just not for someone like me, I think.
Don't be like Chad.
I recommend not being like Chad.
Get good instead. Learn from the mistakes of those you deem inferior.
Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about... this is going to be a difficult name to say with a cold.
Oh, God.
Monster Hunter World. A lot of R's in that I wanted to sort of like... which, I don't know, I've played a little bit of it.
Oh, yeah?
Still playing it.
Monster Hunter World.
Until next time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is at noclippodcast.com or at splattershot.pro. There you can find email address, our Twitter account, find all of our old episodes. If you're a big fan of Metroidvanias, we've done episodes on Ori, Metroid Fusion, Metroid Prime. Do we do any other Metroidvanias? Who cares?
I don't think so.
Find out for yourself. Explore the environment that is our episode list.
It's a very carefully crafted environment, which we will talk about carefully crafted environments next time on the Monster Hunter World episode. See you guys later.
You're gonna keep in that little... like, is that gonna...
For some reason, all video game related paraphernalia is like just like some shitty, glowy, like not even future. It's like light up sneakers for adults.
Yeah.
Like, look at my fucking graphics card. It has a stupid blue light on it. Like, I don't care. I don't want my graphics card to light up. I don't even want to acknowledge that it exists.
Why don't you want to acknowledge the existence of your graphics card?
It's just like, because it's a computer component. It's literally the most boring thing. Like, some rice on the ground in the desert might be slightly more boring. But then you even have to think, like, oh, how did it get there? You assume a computer is a graphics card. I don't also need my graphics card to shine a blue light on my room. But I bought it because it was a cheap option that was good. And that's how I ended up with the light-up headphones as well. And this is why I hate video games.